is Local Matters on CBS 17 News at 4.
Access to abortion and the economy are two of the top issues of this election. The only true toss-up congressional race in the state is no exception.
The newly drawn 13th district includes Johnson County and a part of Wake, Harnett, and Wayne County as well. CBS 17's Russ Bowen is live now, and you sat down with Republican candidate Bo Hines, who's going to face Democrat Wiley Nickel. Russ, you asked Hines to clarify several issues.
Yeah, and these are issues that Democrats have gone after from day one in this campaign. So I wanted to get Bo Hines on the record with a full explanation of where he stands. So, Bo, I know we talked about this a bit when I last saw you during the primary, and that's abortion. But it's still a primary factor, so to speak, in this election. I need you to just lay it out from A to Z. Where do you stand on abortion? Are there exceptions as far as you're concerned?
Absolutely, more than happy to. Well, Russ, I believe that life does begin at conception. I'm pro-life. I've made no bones about that. But there are certain instances, and I'll give you an example. There was a 10-year-old girl that was raped and impregnated in Ohio. And in cases like that, I think we have to take an individual look. That girl should not have to go forward with that pregnancy because that would impact, the rest of her life. There's major long-term health consequences for that. We have to protect people in vulnerable situations like that, especially when there's health risks involved. But generally, I am pro-life, and my position is much less radical than my opponents. My opponent believes that abortion should be legal all the way up to the point of birth. Aborted babies that survive the abortion, sometimes, the Progressive Caucus, which he has sought the endorsement of, believes they should allow the baby to suffocate on the table. I mean, this stuff is absolutely insane, and I think that even pro-choice folks, there's some boundaries that they believe in, whether it's a heartbeat, whether it's 15 weeks. And I think that life beginning at conception, I think that being pro-life generally is much less radical than 9-month abortion.
So when you bring that instance up, that tells me that you're open to, because I don't think we really talked about this before. Before we talked about the life of the mother being at risk, but you're also talking about the rape of a child as a possible exception.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, you have to look at it on an individual basis, and I think that's, one example I can give, where clearly, there should be an exception made.
As far as I know at this point, you're the only Republican congressional candidate to get financial help from Tom Tillis's PAC, which is NC Red. Is that an indication of who you are as a candidate, or is it also about how competitive this race is?
Well, I think Senator Tillis does a good job, but in reality, I'm my own person. I have my own beliefs. I'm not saying we would vote the exact same way, but we're on the same team. And in my opinion, this is more than just a political fight. This is spiritual warfare. It's good versus evil. And I think that you're seeing Republicans come together. They're banding together and fighting back against what we believe is major overreach from government, which we believe is a failed administration that's caused complete economic deprivation in this country. And I think that's why the senator is supporting us, and we're glad to have his support.
Well, with Senator Tillis in mind, as we're just talking, there's some issues or pieces of legislation that he stood behind that he's gone against the grain of some folks within his own party, one of which he is a co-sponsor of codifying gay marriage. Where are you on that issue?
Well, I think that's a states' rights issue. I don't think the federal government should be touching that at all. That's my personal belief. I think that's what Obergefell, made it a states' rights issue, made it legal, and I think that's where we should keep it. But, I'd rather see states deal with that issue than the federal government.
But I need a clearer answer on where you stand as far as gay marriage is concerned.
Sure. I believe in traditional marriage, but I also believe in the right of privacy, and I believe that whatever people want to do in their own home is completely their business, and the government should stay out of it.
One other piece of legislation that he's co-sponsoring and working hard for is also supported by Mitch McConnell, and that is the Electoral College Act. Would you vote for that particular piece of legislation? That, if folks aren't aware of it, it would really clarify what the vice president's role is when it comes time to count the electoral votes.
To be honest with you, Russ, I'd have to take a look at the legislation. I haven't taken a deep dive into that, and I wouldn't be comfortable giving my position on it until I do.
Do you believe that Joe Biden honestly won the 2020 election?
Well, he certainly received the most votes. I think that, with our election system now, there's obviously room for fraud, and I think we all understand that. I think until we have voter ID in our country, until we get rid of ballot harvesting, until we have same-day voting, where there's one day you can vote like our Constitution intended, I think that there is going to be fraud. I don't think that we have enough information right now to say whether that would have impacted or overturned the 2020 election. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but he certainly got the most votes. votes, and I accept that.
Where are we today with the economy as far as you're concerned? Is the Federal Reserve doing too much? Have they not done enough? What has Biden done right? Has Biden done wrong?
Well, I mean, when you have overbloated government spending like we've had, and it's not even, just this administration, it's for decades. This administration has obviously poured gasoline on the fire, but you're going to have, inflation. And right now at 8.3% inflation, that's the equivalent of 1 month's salary for the average American. I mean, who can afford that? I know my wife and I can. I mean, we have to pay our rent. We buy groceries. You go to the gas pump. Everything's more expensive. The dollar is not going as far. And even though the dollar is strong compared to the rest of the other currencies across the globe right now, world economies are collapsing. And we have yet to feel the impact of that. It's a very scary proposition for Americans, but we have to get spending under control at the government level. I think the Federal Reserve is doing everything they can right now to chase it. I don't know if it's going to be enough. I would like to tell you that it is, but right now every indicator we have is that there's going to be some economic hardships that we're going to have over the next few months, and this administration really needs to step up to make sure that everyday items are affordable for the American people, and part of that includes unleashing American energy, which the administration has attempted to do now. But for the first 2 years when President Biden was in office, he basically stopped all fracking leases. He shut down the Keystone Pipeline. And, this stuff is making gas more expensive. It's making input costs for farmers more expensive. It's very dangerous to the American people.
So, Angela and Rod, I also asked Hines about former President Trump's possession of classified documents and his take on whether Trump had the authority to store them at Mar-a-Lago. That answer from him we'll have coming up at 5:30. I'll also, of course, be talking to his opponent, Wiley Nickel, the Democrat, this week, so he can respond to some of these claims. You can catch all of our candidate interviews, of course, at CBS17.com, guys.
Good stuff there, Russ. Thank you.